How are you guys doing? Yeah? Okay. So I'm here to talk about experimenting on social media and adapting to failure. And I want to say congratulations. You've taken the first step, which is you're here. Your bosses thought it was worthwhile to have you here. Swear to you that as recent as last year, we've gotten questions from employees at Interior asking whether social media was a fad and whether they needed to care about it. So at all levels of the government or all over, social media, there are people who resist social media and advances. How many of you know what the Department of the Interior does? Yeah. Oops. Let me go. Okay. So I'm Deputy Director of Digital Strategy for Interior, and I manage our social media. That's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, our blog. And Interior is known for its landscapes, public lands, national parks. But we also do more than that. We do things like dams, and we provide a lot of water out west. We do tribal relations, and we also cover things like endangered species, offshore oil and gas drilling, coal. And so our audience is very diverse, and our mission is very diverse. And I know that we're known for our photos, but what I want to talk about today is sort of tips and tricks that I've learned that, like, even if you don't have amazing visuals, you can still use some of the things that we found that work for us. So today I'm going to cover why do people share. We're going to define success and failure, tips for experimenting, how to get buy-in. Is there anything anybody else wants to talk about today besides this? Okay. Yeah.
How do you measure success?
Oh, yep. We'll cover that in there. Great. So why do people share? And there is a book from 2013 called Contagious. Has anybody read it? Okay. It looked at advertising and word of mouth. And even though it's from 2013, it's still pertinent today, and it can be applied to social media. Think about how many at the end of the day talk to someone about what you saw on social media. Like your significant other, your friends, like now is it like what you talked about on the news or what you saw on social media? Mm-hmm. So the book found that number one reason why people share, social currency. These are things like it makes them look good, you know, exclusives, behind the scenes, them getting to do once-in-a-lifetime experiences. They found that people share because of triggers, things that are top of mind, how they're feeling at that moment, they're willing to share because of it. They share because of emotions. If they care, they share. And that could even be negative emotions like anger or frustration, but it's that emotion prompts them to share. They share because it's public. You're more apt to do things if you see others doing it. It's like tip jars. How many of you want to be the first person to like something or retweet it? How many of you avoid being the first person and maybe like reconsider doing it? Exactly. There's the practical value. It's tips, tricks, advice that are helpful. And then finally, stories. Ways to take and connect to people, connect individual stories to a larger picture. And why am I telling you guys all this? I think it helps frame your content of like how you're going to frame posts that you do, maybe your strategy, the types of content that you want to put out there, or just how you think about social media in general. So I've got a couple examples. The first one is of a cat in the dryer, me just thinking about life. Like, which one of the 6 areas do you think that this is an example of? Like, what about triggers too? It could be triggers. Like, maybe someone else is just feeling that way about life right now too, but it is emotion. Who knows tasty? Who loves that? Exactly. Practical advice, right? People, it has their audience because of practical advice. What about BuzzFeed? BuzzFeed's great at this. It's 53 pictures only introverts can truly appreciate. Like, why do you think that this one was popular? Emotions, triggers, it resonates. Okay, so defining success and failure. I think that this is important. You have to ask yourself, both on the big picture and the small picture, why are you doing what you're doing? Maybe it's on the individual post. Maybe it's your overall strategy for a platform. Maybe it's your overall strategy for your entire social media program. So here are some of the reasons I see doing things, and maybe there are others. So if you guys have others at the end, let's talk about those too. One is education. Maybe you're trying to change hearts and minds. It's not action, but you're just trying to get people to learn about something you do and to know about it. Maybe it's a positive association. Maybe all you care about doing is taking and giving someone a positive feeling so that they associate that with you and they'll come back to you more for that. Maybe it's not technically related to your mission, but you're sort of giving them a reason to come and see your content. Taking action. Are you trying to get them to go to your website to read a story? Are you trying to get them to maybe sign up for a program, to buy something, anything like that? Engagement. Are you looking for your likes, your shares, your retweets, your comments? News coverage. Are you looking for that like unicorn of social media where you do something that goes viral? Are you correcting misinformation? And by this, a great example is Fish and Wildlife Service is part of the Department of Interior, and they listed a lion as endangered. And it's mostly a scientific organization. And so they were using the scientific name for it. Turns out that name happened to be listed on Wikipedia as extinct. And so they were getting a lot of questions about this listing, a lot of concern and confusion. So they quickly created a blog post to answer those questions and to stop that misinformation from happening. So they might not have promoted it heavily on social media, but they used digital tools to better educate people and to stop more questions from happening and to avoid confusion. So all of these are great reasons to do something. Maybe you have multiple reasons for doing something. At Interior, our main strategy is to get people to love public lands. We use our photos to get people to love us, that positive association, and then we slip in that policy stuff. We hide our veggies in there, and it helps. It helps us have a higher reach on those other ones, to have more engagement. I know that you asked about measuring success, and social media is amazing because we have so many numbers, and I think that there are different baselines for what you're doing. A photo of an animal for us is going to be very different than a tweet about a policy work and their baseline in success. I also like to throw out a pitch there that numbers don't always mean everything, and maybe when we're defining success and failure, we should look for the qualitative impact, how you're changing lives. My favorite comment that we've ever got is that someone told us our account made him retire early so that he could go visit all these places. Like, how, that means more to me that I made a huge difference in one individual's life than it was maybe seen by like 100,000 people, you know? So, you know what success is. You can define failure, right? It's probably not reaching your goals. Maybe your post's a dud. They all happen, right? Like, it's not the end of the day. Maybe you receive negative engagement. That one hurts. That one hurts a lot. But all of these things, you can look back at the failure, right? And you say, well, if I used a different photo, or if I framed it in a different way, or if I thought about it differently, or maybe engaged more, I don't know, like maybe that you take that back, that failure, and you say, how do I make it better next time? How do I incorporate this into the next thing I do? There's the failure where technology doesn't work. That happens, right? That's life. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try things. It means you shouldn't wait till things are perfect to try them. At parks, we have a problem. Internet connection's bad. There's cell connection's bad. But it's worth trying all the live content. It's worth trying Facebook Live or Periscope or any of the live content. And maybe you didn't maybe it cut out and you had to go early. You can do a follow-up post. You can say, what technology do I need next time to make it better? And how can I improve? I think people get scared of failing, but really, if you can use it as a way to improve and you've learned something, it's not really failure then, right? Like it's how can I keep growing and expanding? So then there's the times when mistakes happen with social media. I can't say that I remembered this. Bridget from Twitter, we happened to be riding the same bus home and talking about this, and she brought it up as an example of another type of failure. Who remembers the infamous getting slizzard tweet from Red Cross in 2011? So someone commingled personal and private and public accounts and tweeted about getting drunk on the weekends. And they copped to it. They took it down, responded. There's probably some records. They probably had to keep it for records. But then in the original tweet, they mentioned Dogfish Head. Dogfish Head saw it, and then they did fundraising. So they took a failure and they turned it into a positive response. Right? Like, I mean, you can't really plan for that, but you got to be on your toes. And these things don't happen very often. These are the rare instances. It's this type of failure, when you experiment, that tends to be the majority of failure that we have. I don't know about you, but I'd take this failure. Like, as long as it means I'm trying new stuff. So, tips for experimenting on social media. And these are tips that I've learned throughout my time at Interior, and then I previously worked at the energy department, nonprofits, but I'm sure all of you guys have your own tips out there that we can share at the end. How many of you also, I should also phrase it, that how many of you use emojis in your social media posts, your official social? Okay. How many of you remember the first time you did it? When was it? Last year? What about anybody else? Yeah? 4 months ago, okay. At Interior, we did it in 2014. And I remember thinking, why aren't we using emojis? Like, everybody uses emojis. That's the type of experimenting I'm talking about. We should be using social media like people use it, not like brands, not like the bureaucracy, not like the federal government. We should be using social media like the people we want to reach use it. How else are we going to reach them if we're outdated compared to them? So, my first tip, it's not all about you. Sometimes, like how many of you have been asked, how are you going to support this announcement? Can you tweet this out? Something like that. Yeah? Sometimes, if you're going to create a community and an engaged community, it's not all about you. It's a two-way street. And sometimes it's what your audience wants to hear. This example is every February, when the conditions are right, and there's water coming over this in this waterfall, and the sun hits it at a certain angle, it makes it look like it's glowing like fire. People flock to Yosemite to see this. The park hates talking about it. They never cover it on social media. Why? Because they don't want new visitors. Our audience loves it. And our goal of our accounts is to get people to love public lands and to have experiences and to see experiences that they can't have. So this is showing them something that they might not be able to see, they might not can't afford to go, but we do it even though the park doesn't like it when we do it because our audience wants it. Right? Like sometimes you have to say, isn't this what social media is about? Is showing people that they can't see themselves? Not saying, oh, we're going to get inundated by people because they're going to be coming to us because they saw it on social media, but saying, how can we use social media to give them unique experiences? How do you know what your audience wants? You listen to them. At Interior, we read and try to respond to almost every comment. And this is helpful because we learn what our audience wants to see. And in this example, we noticed when we post animal photos, people either talk about their spirit animal or they talk about which animal they are in the photo. So we phrased it that way. Which fox are you? As you can see here, people got into it. They said, you trying to be like, this beautiful view. And I'm over here like, shit, I'm going to scare him so bad. Wow, I'm so funny. Like, it's an example of, we framed our caption and we looked for that content based on what our audience said in previous posts. My third tip is to be fans of your community. It's kind of like tip one, but in this case, it's recognizing that you might not be the right voice for your message. Maybe it's sharing user-generated content, or it's telling the story of someone who was impacted by your program or your organization in some sort of way. For our Instagram account, we started sharing user-submitted photos and their stories, the stories behind the photos. And after we started doing that, we saw a growth of 500,000 followers in a year. And that's because people like seeing their content up there, and then they're more apt to share it with their friends and family because it's them and their content. And and it's also better to hear from a citizen, an individual, about why you should visit a place, why you should do something, instead of it coming from the federal government, right? Like, there's a distrust of government. There's a sort of, like, they're out to do their own thing. But when you're fans of your community and they're your voice, they get to say things, and they get to say it in a way that maybe we can't say it. But it's what we want to say. Tip 4 is know your audience. It's all connected, right? You're listening. It gives you a better sense of what content is worth testing. I love this photo. It's such a goofy photo. It would bomb on interiors accounts because it's not what our audience likes. That's not their sense of humor. It's not. It's just not the types of content we share. But this works for them, the wildlife refuge system. They have their sense of humor, and they know their audience, and this is what works for them. So tip 5 is be human. We've sort of talked about this already. But we might work for the government, but we're all human, right? So have a unique voice for your social media accounts. It's not stuffy, it's not formal. Boils down the important things. Maybe it includes not important things, but you're trying to get that positive association. The benefit is when humans make mistakes, we all do, even if it's a spelling error, people are more forgiving because it's not just a bureaucratic organization, there's a person behind it, and they realize that. So this example is Secretary Zinke, our new Secretary of Interior. And with his account, it's not just about what he's doing that day. They're showing snippets of his office, his knife collection, or his favorite Teddy Roosevelt photo, patches from his uniform. They're more informal, and they're showing he's a human being, and he's not just the Interior Secretary. Tip 6, use humor when appropriate. Got to have that caveat in there. Humor is an icebreaker. It helps make your content relevant to other people. My one advice is to gut check it with others, making sure that what you find funny isn't offensive to someone else. So maybe you gut check it with a couple people and say, can this be taken the wrong way? This example we did the day after Thanksgiving. It was a bear from Denali. Bear looks like it's spent, like done with the day. So we framed it. We took this piece of content and we made it a little funny and relevant, asking about people if they overate over Thanksgiving and saying they're not alone because this bear looks like it's got the same problem too. Tip 8 is to watch the trends. Fish and Wildlife Service, with our accounts, like I said, we're trying to make people love public lands. Their whole goal, why they do what they do, is to make wildlife relevant to people. So this example is a couple weeks ago, scientists were on Twitter talking about the best carcass they've seen as part of their work. Does anybody remember this? There was a fox in an ice block. So this happened. We happened to come across this photo at a wildlife refuge about the same time. And they latched on to best carcass hashtag. How many people expect that from a government agency? New York Times saw it, covered it in print and on web. They got a print edition because of a tweet. Like, didn't mention the tweet, but it caught their eye because of it. Tip 9, similar, is to tag onto current events. Maybe it's annual days. Maybe it's something that's happening in news. But you can use those things to apply it to your content. You can use evergreen content to make it relevant. So this one, I think, is probably Fish and Wildlife's most popular tweet ever. And it was after the Cubs won the World Series, and Cubs Parade was trending. So they had a little fun with it. Tip 10 is to test it on different platforms. And just because we manage social media, and there's a lot of accounts out there, doesn't mean we have to put it on every account. Just like a repairman doesn't use every tool in his toolbox, social media person doesn't have to use every tool in his or her toolbox, right? And if we're experimenting and trying something new, maybe you test it on Facebook first. You see how it works. Maybe you test it on Instagram. Maybe you tweak captions and you write different content for different platforms. Maybe you have different voices on different platforms. Our voice on Twitter is more informal. On Facebook, our audience is older, so we're a little bit more formal. On Instagram, we're fun. So my final tip is to admit when you make a mistake. We all make mistakes, so just admit it. So this one, I made a bunch of mistakes on it. It's an example of an eagle that got a goal, and then its goal friend decided to protect its goal, and so I didn't know what happened. Did the one on the bottom survive? I didn't know. Did the eagle eat it? I didn't even think to ask. And we got 200 comments. The first 200 were about it. So I quickly found, it was late at night, I quickly talked to the photographer, got the info, and then I just started responding to the comments. And then people got upset because they were reading all the comments and saw that I was responding to all the comments, and they said, why didn't you just update the post? I didn't think about that. It was late at night, and I was doing it, right? So then that spiraled. And I admit, I didn't think about it. The other mistake, who knew? I've always thought these were seagulls. Seagulls don't exist. There's no such bird as a seagull. They're called gulls. And 200 of these 1,400 comments were telling us how we got seagulls wrong. I know, exactly. Didn't the scientists look at this? No, scientists don't look at this. But we admitted, oops, we learned something new, and we told them. We said, sorry guys, thanks for the new info. And our community jumped in and started defending us then, because we were human and we admitted to something. I admit to being wrong more times than I like on social media, mostly because it's easy to change a negative interaction into a positive one, even if I'm not wrong. But it helps to admit when you make a mistake. So getting leadership buy-in. Unfortunately, I don't have a secret to this. It's all about building trust with whoever your boss is, whoever needs to sign off on content. Showing that you can walk before you run. Showing that you can do what you normally do good, and then showing how you can improve it from there. Creating these open communications of hey, I really think we need to be using emojis in our posts. Look at all, having that line to throw out ideas and to brainstorm with your boss or whoever, that's key. You can give examples of someone else doing it. So maybe the Marines is doing something, or the Army's doing something that you really like, and you say, I can really adapt from this. Show them that example and say, look, they did this, they took a chance, they succeeded, we should do it too. Start small, start with that little emoji, and work from there. And then finally, point to past results and show, hey, this one time we tried something new, here's what happened, good or bad, and say, this is why we should try it again. My last piece is a warning. There will always be haters. This example comes from last week, actually, in which it was National Puppy Day, and dogs aren't the only animals with pups. So we did a post about all the different species that have pups and how they relate to public lands and where you can see them on public lands. Colin here didn't think they were connected, National Puppy Day and a fox pup. And so we tried to respond, and it spiraled. Colin got upset. But hey, it was worth us trying. Like, he was, of the detractors, he was maybe 2 of the 400 that were positive. Also, the guy at the top defending us, our community, saying, how's it feel to get owned on Twitter.com by the Interior Department? But I mean, this is social media. People are their keyboard warriors, and we have to get tough skin. And not every negative comment should stop us from doing something. So that's all I have. Any questions or?
Thanks for your presentation. This is excellent stuff from an interagency perspective to see how other teams are taking on their challenges and finding ways forward. I appreciate you making the time to come out. I'd like to ask specifically in the current environment, this may be a radioactive question, but I think it's a pretty big gorilla in the room right now. In the current information environment, it's pretty saturated with political tensions, us and them, what have you. And the Department of Interior is really at the center of some pretty intense discussion, a lot of varying opinions out there. Are you in the middle of that at all? Are you managing any of those conversations, and how are you approaching that? There's a lot of discussion about the use of federal lands in different ways that are fairly controversial. What was the approach? Did you get any overarching guidance, and how are you finding your way forward to navigate through the current political information environment?
You're right. I mean, there is a point of social media happened under the previous administration, and we've never transitioned from one party to the next in agencies. And we haven't done it in a way that we've been able to clearly articulate that policies do change. And my stance is usually making sure that the press team and the digital team are on sync and we're using the same talking points, because I don't want something that I'm responding to on social media to end up in the news and it be opposite of what our talking points are. So I work closely with them. It's still early in the administration and people are still getting the footing. So I think we still have work to do on that front. I'm not gonna lie, we can improve in that way. I would also say that thinking through, we're national level, I'm national level, I do interior main accounts, and then there are people in the field, and hearing from people in the field, us engaging at that level of what happens to land in their state doesn't help any. It's interference from Washington. So we avoid those conversations. Like when Mahir happened, we didn't address it at all on social media. We avoided everything from Oregon during when that happened, because we didn't want to spark the issue, but we also didn't see how it would help us saying anything on social. So I think it's a fine line, and knowing who your actual audience is and what their caring about. We didn't get anything about Mahir on our social accounts either, so we didn't have to engage in that way.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ray, and I work with Army Forces Command. And I like a lot of the information that you gave on some ways for us to be able to make our page content more relevant. I think that you're in a similar situation that I am, in that I don't create the content. Like, I'm not going out to the units as often and taking photos. That happens sometimes, but for the most part, I'm calling the unit pages and stuff and trying to find things from other users, like what you use for your public users, it seems like, give you guys content. My question is on experimenting and trying to do that, fearful of that in my realm, because I feel like that seagull eagle example is what's going to happen every time I try to use something, because the Army has patches and things that are very visual that describe what's happening at any given point. And so I guess, how do you verify that information that you're getting from somewhere else, or make sure that what you're putting out is current and relevant, and not something that like a user took 5 years ago and look at this great photo that we just got. You just got it, but somebody else may have already had it. And then I guess how to respond to that. I know that you were human. I don't think the Army listeners like want to hear that I don't know what I'm doing at Forces Command. So how do you address that?
We share pictures from the archives all the time, like that eagle seagull. I'm not sure that that's current. I'm not sure it was when we shared it. We found this photo of lightning striking that looked like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was 3 years old, and we shared it. It was too cool not to share, and so we had a few people ask, well, why did it take you 3 years to share it? And we said, hey, we found it in the archives, and it was too cool not to share at this point. How do I verify accuracy? I take user-submitted content, and I will, if I have questions about it, I will run it by the park to make sure it's correct. Have people told me the wrong thing? Like, have they told me it was a sunrise when it was really a sunset? And did our users know that location to be like, that's not possible? Yes. Like, you take the punches and you keep rolling and you say, I'm sorry, like, we had a misunderstanding. And I didn't blame the user because I didn't want them to feel like they were the problem, but I also said, hey, it was a miscommunication, like, we've updated it, or we'll do better, or things like that, you know?
Does the Department of Interior have a social media handbook?
We do. We call it a digital media guide. We are in the process of updating that right now. But right now you can find it doi.gov/employees/DM guide. But we update it regularly. So it used to be a PDF, and now we update it. Now we've just turned it into a web page, because who uses PDFs anymore? And social media changes so fast that well, social media changes so fast. How you expect me to update a PDF and then post it back on the website, making sure it's 508 compliant? Like, so we turned it into a web page, and then we just update the page as we need to, as questions arise, as new technology happens, like, you know, as new guidance comes out, like, here's how you should be using Periscope, or here's how you should be using Facebook stories, or things like that, you know?
Ma'am, last question for us. How do you manage the social media channels from field offices versus what the national channels put out?
Oh, so I don't manage the field offices. Interior is a true bureaucracy, so we have people in the field, and then they have regional people that they answer to, and then there's Washington, and then so if I wanted to go to someone in the field, I have to go through 4 layers. So I have to respect that. Do I break it sometimes because I need an answer right away? Yeah. But I don't do much on managing content that they do. I take what they do, and I cherry pick the best, usually, for what they're doing. Did that answer your question? Oh,
Hi. I'm Michelle Eaton. I manage the social media presence for Air Force Space Command, and we have various wings throughout the country and actually in other countries as well. How do you have the same situation, and if so, how do you align your subunits, your people in the field with your messaging? How do you kind of keep them all on message, helping you reach your goals at a national level? How do you keep everybody on the same page, so to speak?
So the bureaucracy, the filtering down of messaging points, but to be honest, they should know what they're, like, I mean, we should be giving them top line messages, but like someone at a park has a very different purpose for why they're doing social media than why someone in a regional office is doing social media, and then why I'm doing social media, and our goals are different. So the content that a park is putting out is like hyper-focused to their visitors in their area and people who have visited. And so they're going to be talking about ranger-led events or things like that that don't have anything that I would never cover on social media. But I think having that open lines of communication, being there when people have questions, we try to look at people's accounts, and when we see issues, we flag them for the people in the region so that they can address them when maybe they're not the same messaging goals as we have, or like maybe concerns about whether they're allowed to do that or not, like promote an event that's paid for with their friends group. But I like to think that everybody should be doing the tips and listening to their audience so that they should know what sort of content resonates with them, and they should also have, they have guidance from their superintendent or their, like, whoever is the refuge manager or whoever is the head of the program, and we try not to interfere too much in that.
Thank you so much. Sir, did you have a short question?
I was just going to ask really quick. It wasn't lost on me when you said you might have disagreements with your audience, but I saw Collins and I saw your seagull. If you're going to the responses, how do you all make the decision as far as when the conversation is over, whenever you've gotten to a place, this is all you can have, or do you just continue the argument until you've won?
No. You can tell, right? If the Interior Department has, as part of the Bureau of Land Management, something called the Wild Horse and Burro Program. They think that we're slaughtering horses, the wild horses in the West. We're not. They post on, but they're not afraid to complain about it, about a photo that's not related to wild horses. We don't engage them because we've tried, like, that they're not going to listen to facts. But if you try, I'm more apt to try and engage with someone who might be iffy, even if they have like 2 followers on Twitter or whatever, not very big, because I want to change like hearts and minds. I want to impact someone's life. I want to better educate them about the department's work. And so even if it's a small one and you can change, someone's, you try once. If it doesn't work, you just let it go, right? We tried once with Colin, and that was it. Like, we let everybody else do it from there. But we didn't want to get into a war, and we didn't want that to be the headline. But it's worth trying once, right? Like, maybe they'll come around. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. They're not, most of the time, people aren't expecting a reply. And so they're surprised that there's someone replying to them in the first place. So